والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى كل ما استنى بسنته واهتدى بهديه إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا ثم أما بعد. Today is the final lesson in the series of the life and the main events that were manifested and that were actually done by our Amir, the Khalifa Salahudeen Ayyubi rahimahullah. And right from the beginning, I would like to say that in a 5 weeks series, it is impossible for us to give him the right that he deserves. Salahuddin, as I mentioned in the first lecture I gave, he is more than just an army general that has succeeded in regaining the honor and the pride of the Muslim Ummah at a particular stage in history. Salahuddin rahimahullah was a reformer of the religion, was a reviver of the complete Ummah in the centuries that he existed in. And naturally, since we spoke about the Battle of Hattin last week, and we spoke about what led to it, how he prepared for it, what happened through it, then the next stage that will come will be what? The conquest of Jerusalem. In the Battle of Hattin, the Crusaders pretty much lost their military power completely. Because when they went out to this particular battle, they have gathered all the soldiers, they have gathered all the forces that they can use, and they went out with their pride, and they were in a very, very good state, psychologically and military, and they were very charged and enraged. So therefore, they were prepared to kill, and they were prepared to win. Even on the level of the faith, because of the fact that they had the fragments of the true cross, they really believed that they were invincible. But what happened in the Battle of Hattin proved that all the hopes, all the faith was not strong enough to stand in front of the haqq and the forces of the haqq when it comes through a man as sincere as Salahuddin rahimahullah. And one thing I wanted to mention last week and I forgot, and I wanted to mention it today before I even begin talking about the conquest of Jerusalem. When Salahuddin rahimahullah was speaking to his soldiers, when he was preparing his army, he kept on saying to them, do not fight for the sake of me. Fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not fight for the sake of me. Fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the result was a complete triumph for the Muslims in this particular battle. Of course, this battle opened the door and opened the gates in front of Salahuddin to go straight to Jerusalem. And if Salahuddin was to move from the Battle of Hattin straight away to Jerusalem, he would have actually conquered it without any sweat, without any hardship. But what he did is that he chose to follow a different plan. What he did is that he actually began to attack all the coastal cities that surrounded Jerusalem. Did not get to Jerusalem straight. Went to Asqalan, went to Gaza, and then moved on bit by bit until he actually got to Jerusalem. Now, as soon as the Crusaders in Jerusalem knew about what happened in the Battle of Hattin and knew about the fact that Salahuddin rahimahullah was actually heading towards them as he's going through the cities, they began to prepare themselves for what? For the siege. There were around 60,000 soldiers from men, and they had a lot of people, a lot of refugees who have actually escaped from the victories of Salahuddin rahimahullah. Because as he was proceeding from one city to another, a lot of the soldiers, a lot of the people were fleeing the cities that Salahuddin was what? Was capturing. So Jerusalem became filled up with thousands and thousands of people. And historians estimate the number of the soldiers or the number of the fighting men in Jerusalem to be 60,000 men. That's besides the children and besides the women and the elderly. And what happened is that at a particular stage, Balian, the one that you saw in the movie The Kingdom of Heaven, he wanted to actually gather more knights. And then what he did, actually, he started recruiting all the boys who were actually above 16. And if they were to come from a noble family, they will actually declare them as knights because they were trying to gather as much people as they can. At the same time, they prepared the walls of Jerusalem. They prepared the catapults, and they dug massive ditches around the wall of Jerusalem, and they set themselves very, very well to welcome Salahuddin and to welcome his army, to ensure that they can block him from entering into the city. As I said, Salahuddin knew about that. So what he chose to do is to attack the coastal cities. Now the first question that comes to mind is, why would Salahuddin do so? If you made such a strong victory and you overwhelmed your enemy, why don't you go straight away to the capital of your enemy and take over it? The reason why he did that is that Salahuddin was thinking further than the period that he was living in. He was thinking further than just making a victory or a temporary victory in Jerusalem. He knew that the Crusaders will not accept and will not take the fall of Jerusalem easily. And he knew that he actually is to expect a lot of armies to come forth and to attack him. And if he was to head from the Lake of Tabariya straight away to Jerusalem, then he would have left himself opened, and the cities that are actually around along the coast can be used as stations against him. So what he wanted to do is that he wanted to make sure that wherever he goes, wherever he steps throughout the land of Palestine and the Sham, all this land would belong to who? Would belong to him. So they will not be able to have bases that are close to the city of Jerusalem. So he cleared the coastal line from one city to another until he got to where? He got to Jerusalem. The second thing that he did is that he used the media force, what we call today the media force. The Battle of Hattin and the victory that happened in the Battle of Hattin was very catastrophic to the Crusaders, so they were really, really shaken. At the same time, a lot of Muslims were happy with it. So what Salahuddin did is that he began to send messengers out to the Muslim world, in the Middle East, in Egypt, in Morocco, in Iraq, everywhere, informing them about what happened in the Battle of Hattin and informing them that he's heading to where? He's heading to Jerusalem. And by doing so, what happened is that thousands and thousands of Muslims began to march towards Salahuddin. A lot of volunteers became interested. A lot of people wanted to have the honor of fighting on the walls of Jerusalem and to be part of the victory of reclaiming Jerusalem back to the Muslims. So that actually shook the Crusaders, but at the same time, it lifted the esteem of the Muslims, and a lot of Muslims began to come to join the army of Salahuddin. Particularly, the historians, they speak about the fact that a lot of scholars, a lot of fuqaha, a lot of people of hadith, a lot of qurra, a lot of Sufi scholars, a lot of religious figures began to actually come towards the army of, to come and to join the army of Salahuddin. The third thing that he did is that he called for the Egyptian forces to join him, because he needed more help. He knew that he had a lot of soldiers in Egypt, so he wanted the Egyptian part of his army to join him. So he sent messengers, and they began to gather themselves, and they formed an army, and then they actually marched towards Jerusalem at the same time. And what he did is that one of the significant things about Salahuddin is that he really prepared for the war that he was actually intending to wage against the Crusaders long time before. And Salahuddin, the thing is, we didn't have the chance to speak about his military structure, but he had a massive, well-organized army. He worked very hard on his navy. He knew that the Crusaders are very strong in the sea, so he wanted to ensure that his navy is strong, and that's why When he went to Egypt, one of the first things that he did when he was a minister, before actually he became a sultan, before he began his formal quest to free the Muslim land from the Crusaders, he built a strong military, a strong Muslim navy. So what he did is that when he called for the Egyptian forces to come and to join him at Jerusalem, he made sure that the Muslim navy is also what? Is also moving along the coast. Why? Because he wanted to make sure that no help from the sea would come to the Crusaders. And wanted to make sure that his army that is coming from Egypt will not be attacked suddenly by any other forces. So by him coming down from the Sham, city by city towards Jerusalem, and by him getting his army, along with all the preparation, along with all the food, along with all the weapons that he needed, and with the cover of the sea, his army is completely what? Protected. And his enemy is completely what? Blocked. So no one can come close to them. And then once he finished all this, he met with his son, Malik al-Afdal, Malik Uthman, who was the head of the Egyptian army. They gathered the forces and they marched towards Jerusalem, and they actually surrounded Jerusalem. Of course, the Crusaders were ready for that. Officially, the battle did not take place until the 26th of September. The siege, by the historians, they say, formally Salahuddin besieged it on the 26th of September. However, skirmishes did take place before that. When he was marching towards Jerusalem, the Crusaders wanted to have a swift attack to scare Salahuddin. So what they did, they gathered a number of the knights, and they went out in a battalion, and they attacked his army. And then he sent one of the battalions of his army, and they attacked him, and they killed all of them, including their prince, including their main knight, the leader. And then what happened is that the Crusaders, after that, they decided not to go out and fight anymore. They wanted to protect themselves from within. He stationed his soldiers around the city, and Salahuddin is very, very smart. Part of his army is that he had an engineering unit. He had something called an engineering unit. The engineering unit was responsible for studying the terrain and the city that he is facing. So they'll go and look at the walls, look at the city, look for the weak points. What is the best point for them to station? What kind of weapon should they use? And then based on the report that he gets from them, he would actually station his soldiers and set up his plan. And they gave him the report, and they showed him the weak spots within the walls of Jerusalem. Even though, and this is a reality, no matter how much and how hard you work on preparing and securing the city that you live in, there are always weak spots that can be detected and found by someone who's very intelligent. And even though the Crusaders worked very hard and they have really prepared themselves for facing Salahuddin, by his unit, they were able to find particular spots which were weak in the walls of Jerusalem. And then Salahuddin, he set up his catapults. He had 12 massive catapults. He had different types of you can say, artilleries that he was using. He had something that's similar to a tank. He had massive arrows to be shot, and he had also something that was advanced back at that time, which is called qadhifatul naft. It was actually a machine that throws balls of petrol, and it burns, and it cannot be easily extinguished by water, and it sticks on the wall, so it burns them, and it burns the wood, and it burns the people. And he also prepared that, and he was ready for for besieging the city. And he gave the orders, and they began to hammer the city with the catapults and with the arrows. And that's why they say when the attack began, you can only see waves and waves of arrows and rocks being heavily falling on the walls of Jerusalem and on the people on the Crusaders in Jerusalem. Of course, the Muslims are fighting to get a city that belongs to them back. And the Christians are fighting to keep a holy city under their sovereignty. And therefore, the fighting that took place was very, very, very fierce. And a lot of people died because both sides were fighting based on what? Based on faith. It was not for the sake of money or for the sake of a house, based on a faith. And Jerusalem was really something that is very, very precious to the Crusaders and to the Christians, especially back then, because the Crusaders and the Christians were much, much more religious than they are today. And they kept on fighting, they kept on fighting, they kept on fighting. The fighting was very, very fierce. But as Salahuddin was continuing to hammer them with the catapults, it became apparent to them that they cannot resist the power of Salahuddin for long. Some of the Western historians, they say that Balian, the hero that you see in the movie Kingdom of Heaven, of course, in the Kingdom of Heaven, you see him that he actually, he lost his wife, so he came back and he wanted to bury her where Jesus was buried, because he can secure her what? Forgiveness, and then she can go to paradise because she committed suicide. Well, and that's what's interesting. The historical records, even amongst the Western historians, are very different than what you see in the movie. Apparently, he got married again. And when he went back into Jerusalem, he went so he can get his wife. And he asked Salahuddin to give him the permission to go into Jerusalem after he besieged it. So the whole scene that you see, that he was preparing everyone and he set the walls, all this is not true. He wasn't even in the city when the siege took place. He came after the siege took place. And Salahuddin gave him permission to go in only for one day, for 24 hours, to do whatever he wants, and he put on him a condition that he does not fight against him. But when he went in, they said that the Queen Sabella and the patriarch of the city, I think his name was Hercules, they insisted on him staying with them and helping them in defending the city. After that, he actually responded to what they said, and he remained in the actual city, and he broke the word that he gave to Salahuddin. Because Salahuddin only allowed him on the condition that he's there for one day, and then after that he does whatever he wants to do, and then he leaves. But he did not, and he actually stayed with them, and he became, honestly, the main person who was responsible for defending the city against Salahuddin. As Salahuddin continued to use the catapults, he began to crack the walls of the city. And when Salahuddin saw that, he actually launched a strong attack. And it will take breaks, and then he will call his catapults, which are like the cannons, to fire very hard. And then the Muslims will come and fight under what? Under the protection of the catapults and under the protection of the arrows, so they will not be hit. And what he used is something that is very interesting. He used to have a unit of diggers. A unit of diggers. What do they used to do? They used to dig under the walls so they can weaken them. So look, where is the foundation of the wall? And they'll dig and dig and dig. And as he hits, what happens to the wall? Gets shaken to make sure that gets destroyed. And they kept on working. And what they did is that they began to crack many, many holes in it. And then they made a massive hole in the actual wall of Jerusalem. The Christians became very scared. They ran to the churches, making the supplications, making the prayers, because they can see that the defeat is what is coming. And their women were trying the best to motivate their men to fight. So what they did, and that's a scene that you saw in the movie as well, where you saw the Queen Sabella cutting her hair. What happened, I'm not sure if she actually cut her hair, but the women of the Crusaders, what they did, they began to cut their hair and cut the hair of the daughters, and to show that they have cut the hair to the men, as a symbol of them becoming what? Slaves. This is what will happen to us if you don't fight and defend us. But all the effort did not pay, did not bear any fruits. And that's when they began to send delegates from them to negotiate with Salahuddin and to actually give him a peace agreement. They came to Salahuddin rahimahullah more than once, and Salahuddin said, no, I will not take the city except by what? Except by the style of Fatah, by conquering the city. And I'm going to do to you what you have done to the Muslims when you first came. the Crusaders, the Knights of the Crusaders, wanted to actually launch a quick and a suicidal attack against Salahuddin, but this was not liked by the Patriarch, and he said, if you do so, then we're going to lose everything, and you're going to leave your women and your children open to what? Open to the soldiers of Salahuddin. So he refused to do that. What they did is that when they made the massive hole that you saw in the movie, the Muslims charged very fiercely because they wanted to get through it. But then the Crusaders actually, they blocked them very hard. And yes, they did raise the flags, but then the flags were taken down and they were pushed back. But the Muslims by this stage, they have filled up the ditch so they can march into it. They have cracked the holes. Even though the Crusaders succeeded in blocking them, but that was only what? A temporary block. Because it will just only take another charge for the Muslims to go in. Balian, what he did is that he sent a messenger and he asked for Salahuddin. He asked to meet Salahuddin personally. Before that, they were sending what? Delegates. And Salahuddin said, I agree to meeting him. So he came to Salahuddin and he tried to actually to negotiate some agreement with Salahuddin, but Salahuddin did not want to accept any agreement. Then Balian did something that he used that will actually be the trump card with which he can change the opinion of Salahuddin. He said to him, there are thousands of us in there, and the people who are there are fighting because they think that they have a chance of having a peace treaty with you. My people, different than what you see in the movie, my people are people that love life and they would hate to die. And if they are going to know that you are actually only going to kill them, then what they will do is that they will go and kill the women and the children and destroy their houses, so you'll not get anything, you'll not gain anything from them. And then after that, they'll go and kill the 5,000 Muslim prisoners that we have. And then after that, we'll go to your mosque and we'll go to your holy sites and we'll just demolish them. And after that, we'll just kill ourselves or you kill us. We don't care anymore. So basically, what he did is that he was threatening Salahuddin, is that if he doesn't accept or doesn't accept the peace treaty, then he is going to basically blow up the whole city, kill everyone, including themselves. When Salahuddin heard that, he changed his opinion. He did not want the Al-Aqsa and the holy sites to be touched. He did not want the Muslims to be killed. And Salahuddin did not really have an interest in killing women and children. What he wanted was what? Was the city. That's one. Second, Salahuddin has made a vow, if you remember, he made a vow to conquer Jerusalem. And that was one of the main reasons why he didn't want to accept the peace agreement, because he made another that he will actually conquer that city. So he said, give me some time. And then he sat with his ministers, who are all scholars anyway, and they said to him, your nether will be fulfilled, even if you accept the peace treaty on the condition that the terms of the treaty are exactly the terms of conquest. The terms of the treaty are exactly what? The terms of a conquest. So whatever happens in a normal conquest are the terms that you list in your treaty. So the whole courageous scene that they say in the movie, you put terms, I don't offer anything, it's all acting. And Salahuddin set the terms of a conquest. And Balian had no choice except to accept the conditions and the terms of Salahuddin. What were they? In a conquest, when you enter into a city, people become what? People become enslaved. That's one. And second, you get the beauty of the war. So Salahuddin said, I will actually allow you to go out, and I'll allow the people to go out on the condition that they pay a ransom for their freedom. So the ransom was 10 dinar for every man, 5 dinar for every woman, 4 dinar for teenagers, and 1 dinar for children. And that's for who? That's for the rich and the poor. And he did not impose an amount, a different amount between the rich and the poor. Was actually a standard ransom amount. And then he agreed to pay him 30,000 dinar just for those who are poor from them who cannot pay the ransom. On the condition that they put down their weapons And they go out from the city within 40 days. So Salahuddin gave him 40 days to what? To leave the city. And whoever wants to pay the amount, then he actually pays the amount within 40 days. If he does not pay after 40 days, then the soldiers of Salahuddin have the right of capturing this particular person. Balin accepted, and he went out and he informed the people, the patriarch and the main fighters, and they all accepted. And they had no choice anyway. They accepted the conditions and the terms of Salahuddin. Based on that, Salahuddin entered into, or actually he won Jerusalem on a Friday day, was a Jum'ah, on the 27th of Rajab 583 Hijri. How long did the siege take place? It took place for 12 days. So within 12 days, he actually secured that. Now, when the Muslims went in, so what they did, the Crusaders left to put down the arms, and the Muslims flowed into the city of Jerusalem, and everyone was completely joyful of what happened. Of course, what Salahuddin has done here is something that all the leaders of the Crusaders have failed to do. The first thing he did is that he actually was faithful to the agreement that he accepted on himself. Many, many times the Crusaders have actually entered into peace agreements with the Muslims, that you hand us the city on the condition that you let us leave on the condition that we hand you the city, and they will say yes. And then once they go in, what would they do? They'll just massacre all the Muslims they actually inside. But Salahuddin did not do so. What he did is that he placed his main generals or main leaders in his army on the gates of Jerusalem, and they were responsible for collecting the ransom from the people. Salahuddin could have broken his word and could have done exactly what they have done when they entered with the forces of Godfrey, when they entered and they killed thousands of Muslims until the blood of the Muslims was up to the heels of the people who were riding the horses. But Salahuddin did not do that with them. He did not kill any of them. Not a drop of blood was shed by the Muslims when they entered the city of Jerusalem. In fact, what happened is that there were thousands and thousands of Christians in Jerusalem, because they all fled from the cities, and they came and they gathered way in Jerusalem. So a lot of people in there, they were not able to pay the ransom that was placed on them. Which means what? They become what? They become slaves. But what Salahuddin did is that he began to forgive them and to let them go out without paying the ransom. The first thing that he did is that one of his generals, Al-Malik Al-Adil, he said, would you give me 1,000 of them so I can free them for the sake of Allah? And he said, yes. Balin and the patriarch went out from Jerusalem with all the treasures of the church and all the servants that he had. A lot of wealth, a lot of money. Not a cent from these treasures was spent to free any Christian that was in this city. When Balin and the patriarch saw that the Muslim generals are the ones who are asking Salahuddin to gift him some of these people who have not paid the ransom money, they became embarrassed. So they asked Salahuddin, would you gift us some of them so we can free them? And then Salahuddin said yes. And he actually gifted, according to their records, I'm quoting, 700 to Balin and 500 to the patriarch. He wanted to go through the cheap way. He didn't want to spend his money on his treasures, on his own people, on the people who are fighting for his own religion and for the city that he has been telling them that it is what? The holy city and the place of the so-called God. Then after that, the different leaders, they began to ask Salahuddin to free some of them. So one of the leaders, Amir al-Bira, he said to him, there are 500 Armenians there. I would like you to gift them to me. And he said, yes. And another one, Muzaffar ad-Din Kozak, he asked him for 1,000 Armenians, and then he said yes. And then some of the women began to come to Salahuddin. They came and they began to cry in front of Salahuddin. And he asked, why are you crying? And they began to say, some of our men have been taken as prisoners by you. So Salahuddin said, go and each one of you let her look for her husband and take him out and go out with him. And then he gave a decree, whoever's not able to pay his ransom, then he can go out freely. Whoever's not able to pay his ransom, then he can go out freely. SubhanAllah. And then some of the women came to him and they spoke to them about his poverty. So what he did instead, he began to give them some of his own wealth. He began to give them some of his own wealth, and he let them all go out. He let the queen, Sibella, go out with all her servants, with all her treasures. He was not interested in what they have. And he was not interested in shedding blood. And he was not interested in killing. He wanted to make sure that this city that belongs to the Muslims goes back to the Muslims. You want to take your money, take your money. You want to take whatever you want, take whatever you want. Take whatever you want with you. I want that city to be given back to me. And he treated them with so much respect. With the respect that put the Crusaders to shame. To the extent that their historians, which are usually biased, they were shocked by the generosity of Salahuddin in dealing with them. And that's why one of them, he says, he goes, and Salahuddin on that day, he taught the Crusaders and the European world a lesson in tolerance and in forgiveness. Some of the Muslims, of course, the city was under the Crusaders for how long? For 88 years. And thousands of Muslims have been killed and oppressed and tortured. Came to Salahuddin and said, we want to destroy the main church. We want to destroy the main church. We want to actually destroy the grave where they say that Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, has been buried. Basically, we want to destroy all the holy sites that they have, especially Knesset al-Qiyamah. Salahuddin refused. He said, no, we will not touch the church. I'm only going to do what Al-Khalifa Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu has done. And that shows the respect that Salahuddin had to the Christians. Did they have that towards the Muslims? No. And I'll tell you what they did to the Aqsa, and I'll tell you what they did to As-Sakhra in a second. Then some of the Christians came to Salahuddin and they said, we want to stay here. He said, I'll allow you to stay here on one condition. You don't fight me, you go by the Islamic Sharia, and you pay your tax, you pay your jizya. And they accepted, and based on that, he left them to stay there. And not one house in the city was looted. Not one house in the city was looted. Even there was after 88 years of what? Of occupation. What happened to Iraq in the recent war that took place? How many museums and houses have been looted? Didn't you all see them on the TVs? People running around and stealing. Not one house was looted when Salahuddin was controlled. And his police forces, his army force was spread out in the whole city. You don't harm anyone. You don't bash anyone. You don't kill anyone. You don't loot. You don't steal. You just go in with your own respect. Absolute, complete control of a massive army of thousands of people. Why? Because these people are people that have been burdened by the faith. When the leader's not with them, they know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing them. So they have that taqwa inside them that always keeps them faithful to the principles that they believe in. And that's why they were really, really shocked by what happened. Our time, we have only 40 minutes, 50 minutes, so we have to skip. And there's some quotes by Grosset, for example, he speaks about Salahuddin. Stephen Rensman, he speaks about Salahuddin and how he shocked them. I'll mention one thing and then we'll move on. They were so shocked by Salahuddin that some of them foolishly began to come and say he cannot be a Muslim. SubhanAllah. He said he must be French. He must be French. Because they thought they were the most noble of people. They have convinced themselves with the lies that they made up. So I said, he must have a French background somehow. He must be one of us. To try to convince themselves. Why? Because they were ashamed by what they have done. Look how they treated the Muslims, and look how he treated them. And that's when they began to praise Salahuddin. Before, they made him a beast, made him a monster. Do you remember? The death wish that the mother would make is for her son to die under the feet of the horse of Salahuddin. If she wants to put him to sleep, you say to him, go to sleep, or I'm going to bring Salahuddin. Salahuddin is going to come and eat you, or coming to kill you. He's going to come and kill you. Now what are they doing? Salahuddin must be one of us. SubhanAllah. Then, the first thing that Salahuddin did in the city was to actually hold Salat al-Jumu'ah. So the Muslims went in and they began to actually clean the mosque and the holy sites from the filth that has been placed in them by the Crusaders. Salahuddin brought the member of Nuruddin for it to be placed in the Masjid al-Aqsa. You remember the first time that we spoke about when Nuruddin gave him the duty of building it? And he built the puppet to be put in the Aqsa? That was a long time ago. That was 546. True? Now it's 583. But Salahuddin has not forgotten. He wanted to fulfill the dream of his teacher Nuruddin Mahmud Zinki. And he brought the actual mimbar, and when the mimbar was brought, all the Muslims began to cry. Because they remembered who? Nuruddin. It's a long preparation. The conquest of Jerusalem did not come like this. Took a lot of work. Took a lot of pain. Took a lot of sacrifice for the Muslims to get to the stage where they actually can go in and defeat all the forces that were there. And Salahuddin began to work and on fixing Bayt al-Maqdis, the whole city. First of all, the Knight Templars, what they did, one of the things that they've done is that they've actually came to the dome, to the Masjid al-Sakhra, which is now known as Masjid al-Sakhra. What they did is actually they turned it into a church. And they built a church around it, and they put a place where they slaughter for the sake of the Trinity. And then they placed a massive rock on top of it. And what they would do, actually, they would cut it, they would try to cut pieces out of it and sell it. To do what? To humiliate it. And then what they did in the Masjid al-Aqsa is that they took parts of it and they made it into their rest houses. Also to what? To humiliate it. And they took the mihrab and they blocked it, they built a wall in front of it, and they turned the mihrab into a storage room where they keep the what? They keep the food and the horses, and they would keep the horses in there, they would keep the pigs in there, they would keep the filth in there. Salahuddin came, and the first thing the Muslims did is that they took the cross down, and they all started working on what? On cleaning it. Salahuddin gave the command for massive amounts of rose water to be brought. And then they all got the water, a massive amount of water, and they began to wash the filth away to the Masjid al-Aqsa and the Sakhra and the Haram of the Aqsa. And they cleaned the walls, they cleaned the ground, they got rid of all the crosses, they got rid of all the pigs. And after they finished cleaning it, what they did, they got the rose water and they got musk, and they just poured it on the ground of the whole Haram and on the walls of the what? Of the masjid, until it became completely cleaned. And then what Salahuddin did is that he spent a lot of money what? Preparing it and adorning it. He started asking and sending people to get the best tiles that they can find. He'll bring them. He'll get the best people who work in calligraphy, and he'll get them. He spent a lot of money into turning Al-Aqsa from a filthy place that they have turned it into the beautiful Haram that has existed until the enemies of Islam went back again under the cover of the mandate, of the British mandate, and they took over it. Subhanallah. And then, after that, Salahuddin, he chose the Khatib, who was one of the scholars of Islam, Al-Zaki, or Ibn Zaki, and he gave the first khutbah. Of course, the khutbah is very long, and I didn't bring the khutbah with me, but the Muslims have actually even recorded the khutbah, but he began his khutbah with فَقُطِعَ دَابِرُ الْقَوْمِ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا وَالْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. And the power and the control of those who are oppressing has been cut and has been put to stop, and all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the world, or Lord of the universe. After that, and of course, since this is the last part, or the final lesson that we have, then I have to end it with the death of Salahuddin, rahimahullah. After that, Salahuddin lived for 6 years, and he made Jerusalem the capital in which he lives. Of course, the Crusaders did not accept it, did not swallow it, and they sent the following crusades. The last of them was the one of Richard the Lionheart. And then Salahuddin, he was able to secure a 5 years or 7 years peace treaty with him, and he pushed them away, and they did not succeed in getting Jerusalem back. And then he got sick, may Allah have mercy upon him. In the month of Safar, he had a very strong fever for 12 days. And then in the 9th day, they say he became unconscious. So what they did is that he stayed in his house, and they got a recital of the Quran to always be sitting next to him and to read the Quran beside his bed until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took his soul away, and he died in the month of Safar in the year 589. And after Salahuddin, they were not able to come back to Jerusalem until the fall of the what? Of the Ottoman Empire, or the Ottoman Khilafah. Until the fall of the Ottoman Khilafah. They fought. The Muslims were not as faithful as they should. People after Salahuddin were not as honorable as Salahuddin. But at least Jerusalem stayed free until the Khilafah fell afterwards on the days of the Ottomans. I want to mention just few points, or few main lessons that we want to learn from everything that we have taken. First, the unity of the Muslims is something that we cannot negotiate or compromise on. And Salahuddin knew about that. And he worked toward that. And he united the Muslims. Even by force sometimes, yes, even by force sometimes. Because if he was to wait for them to come to the senses, then Salahuddin would have never freed Jerusalem. Second, a pious leadership is one of the most important elements of victory in Islam. If the leaders are not living according to the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the guidance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then the hope of reviving an ummah is something that is very, very hard. And that goes on all levels of leadership, whether on the government level, or on the social level, or on the community level. Leaders who are responsible for Muslims have to be pious and have to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And have to work hard towards what? Towards securing the fate of the ummah. Fourth, Salahuddin was the product of pious and God-fearing scholars. He was one of the fruits of a complete school that were brought on taqwa, religion, manners, sacrifice, love of jihad, hatred of dunya. And that's why he succeeded in what he has done. And therefore, if you want to build a victory for your ummah, then what you have to do, one of the main things they have to do, is they have to make sure that the generations that are coming up are generations that have been brought exactly as the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam would have loved for them to be brought. Have to be prepared the way that Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam have prepared his companions. A lot of people worked in the back scene. A lot of things happened. A lot of scholars were around Salahuddin. A lot of scholars prepared even the scholars that came and they were surrounding Salahuddin and even the other leaders. And that's why in 5 lessons, we cannot talk about the whole thing that was set up. But Salahuddin himself was the fruit of a religious school that was built on the aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah, on the zuhd of the true people that knew the meaning of tasawwuf, the Sunni tasawwuf back then, people who knew that the love of jihad and that jihad is not something that can be abolished from the history or from the books or from the teachings of Islam, on people that believed that the ethics that have been brought by Muhammad ﷺ are the best of ethics, and that his promise is the most truthful promise. Only when you have people like that, you can secure victory. And the last thing is that any Muslim that wants to fight or wants to benefit his ummah, then he should make sure that his effort goes under the flag of the Shahada of Islam. La ilaha illallah, Muhammadun Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. No other flag is accepted. No other work is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Arabs were nothing. They were the rats of the desert. With the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they became a nation which melted within Islam. And then all other nations became what? Became part of the big movement, which is the movement of Islam, the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you want victory back, don't try to claim it under Arabism or nationalism or any other regime that you want to think of. Because Allah, for you, will not give it. Because you cannot have the Shahada and allegiance and fighting under another banner in freeing the Muslim land or in establishing the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a shame upon the Arabs for them even to repay the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the favor of Allah upon them when he turned them from Bedouins into a civilized nation, for them to go and to set up the government and the countries under a system other than the system of Allah, which made of them people and civilized humans, when they were before that the rats, as the Persians used to describe them, and as the Romans used to describe them, the rats of the desert, the barefoot Bedouins, the camel riders that no one cared about them. Salahuddin, his dream was bigger than just the conquest of Jerusalem. Salahuddin wanted to get to Europe. That's what he wanted. He wanted to spread Islam there. And therefore the legacy of Salahuddin rahimahullah is not just for you to be strong and arrogant and go out there and kill. No, he wanted to make sure that all the land of Allah is controlled and governed by the laws of Allah, who are the best of laws to be implemented. And all the people to have the chance of joining the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and enjoying the justice and the mercy and the equality and the principles, what? Of Islam, which is the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to secure a safe life in the dunya and a safe abode in the hereafter. But from the mercy of Allah upon us and from His perfect decree that Europe, that Salahuddin was not able to conquer by weapon back then, now it's open before all the Muslims. And you're an example of it. Where are you? You're in Australia. How many thousands of Muslims are in? How many millions of Muslims do we have in Britain? How many millions of Muslims do we have in France? How many thousands of Muslims do we have across all the European countries? How many? Millions. Where are they? In the heart of the land of the Crusaders. So if you want to be faithful to our leaders, if you want to be people that really carry the flag of Salahuddin rahimahullah, then we should carry the flag of da'wah into the countries where we are actually living now. Teach them about Islam. That's all what he wanted. That's all that he wanted. He wanted to spread the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to give the people the chance to hear and know what the teachings of Islam are, without the propaganda that is being set up by the leaders of the Crusaders. That's all he wanted. And now we have that chance. So the legacy of Salahuddin is to spread what? Is to spread Islam according to the teachings of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the guidance of the Sahaba and the guidance of the righteous ulama that have carried this religion century after century, generation after generation. And therefore, if we want to be faithful, we should not be people that go and throw rocks at a synagogue or a church. No. Learn about your religion properly and go out there and be proud of it. And teach them about the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And preach them so you can save them from the hellfire. And make sure that the legacy of Salahuddin rahimahullah is not dead. And the legacy of all the ulama and all the leaders and all the soldiers, they fought that fought under the banner of Salahuddin is not dead. Yet it is continuing through us continuing our effort of da'wah. And the last thing I would like to say is that Muslims cannot afford to stay scattered as they are today. No matter what differences you have with your brother, as long as the differences are not differences of kufr and aqeedah, then you should actually stick to each other and help one another. And work towards strengthening the da'wah of Islam. And instead of 5 working in that direction, and 5 working in that direction, and 10 working in another direction, put your efforts together and work for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And any difference that exists will continue to exist. No one can cancel the differences that exist today. No one can. It's in the nature of humans to differ with one another. And whoever has the illusion that he can come and clear all the differences between the people, then he can actually live in his own illusion, in his own dream world, because this will never happen. But what you should learn is they should learn from the example of the companions of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Never the differences amongst the Muslims should lead for the leadership to be split. As long as it is not kufr, then the leadership should never be split. Let us carry the legacy of Salahuddin rahimahullah properly. Let us preach the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this land and in the land and throughout the land of the world. Let us spread the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we do that, when we live our religion properly, when we learn our religion properly, when we apply our religion properly, that's when inshallah ta'ala the victory will come to the Muslims. And the victory of the Muslims does not have to come through Arabs. The Arabs were the main route through which this path was set. But as you can see from Salahuddin rahimahullah, every race that wanted to have the honor and wanted to carry the flag, Allah gave him that chance. Where did the grandfather of Salahuddin come from? He came from a small village called Vin on the borders of Armenia and Azerbaijan. Did not grow up in the castles of the Khalifa or any leader. When you are sincere with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will bring victory to you and will bring it to you from the most unexpected place that you can think of. And therefore will never surprise me if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was to bring from the generations that are living in the country a selection that will play a role in the victory that comes to the Muslims. He did not come from Baghdad or from Damascus or from Halab or from Egypt. He came from where? From Armenia. And from which background? From a Kurdish background. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Never forget that verse. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. We'll stop here inshaAllah ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.
To listen to or download more Islamic lectures, please visit www.islamicmedia.com.au.